The military dog lunged across the crowded diner and wrapped his body around a 7-year-old girl he had never met. Blood soaked through her sleeve. Cigarette burns marked her neck. She hadn't spoken in 8 months. His handler shouted commands, but the dog refused to move. 90 pounds of trained killer became a living shield around a child the whole world had thrown away. When her aunt stormed through the door, demanding the girl back, the dog bared his teeth and made a choice that would cost him everything. He chose her. What he uncovered next would expose a murder no one was supposed to find. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe and stay until the very end. Your support means everything to us. The bell above the door rang twice as Sophie Miller pushed her way inside. Her shoulder hit the frame because she couldn't judge the distance anymore, not since they took her arm. The cold followed her in swirling around her ankles, but she barely felt it. She had stopped feeling cold months ago. The Pinecone Diner was loud with conversation and the clatter of plates. Sophie stood near the entrance, her one hand gripping the strap of a backpack that held everything she owned. A torn photograph, a broken crayon, a sock that used to belong to her baby brother. She scanned the room the way she had learned to scan rooms quickly, carefully looking for danger first and safety second. A woman near the window noticed her and leaned toward her husband. "Frank, look at that child." "Don't make eye contact," Frank muttered. "She'll come over here." Sophie heard them. She always heard them. People thought children didn't understand whispers, but Sophie understood everything. She just couldn't make herself speak anymore. She moved toward the first open table, where an elderly couple sat with cups of coffee and a shared piece of pie. The woman had white hair and kind eyes, the kind of eyes Sophie's grandmother used to have before the cancer took her. Sophie stopped beside their table. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. It never did anymore. So she simply pointed to the empty chair. The woman's face changed. The kindness folded into something else, discomfort, maybe fear. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," the woman said, pulling her purse closer. "We're expecting someone." They weren't expecting anyone. Sophie could tell by the way the man wouldn't look at her, by the way the woman's hand trembled as she reached for her coffee. Sophie nodded once and turned away. The next table held a businessman in a gray suit, his phone pressed to his ear, his laptop open in front of him. Sophie approached slowly, her worn sneakers barely making sound against the floor. The man glanced up. His eyes traveled from her face to her empty sleeve to her dirty clothes. His expression hardened. "No," he said before she could even gesture. "Go away." He didn't say it quietly. Half the diner heard. Sophie felt their eyes on her back, hot and heavy. Her chest tightened, but she didn't cry. She had used up all her tears months ago. She moved to the third table. A young mother sat there with a toddler in a high chair, the little boy smashing crackers into paste. Sophie's heart ached at the sight. Her brother used to do that. Mash everything, make a mess, laugh about it. Her brother wasn't laughing anymore. Her brother wasn't anything anymore. The mother looked up and immediately pulled her son closer. "Where are your parents?" Sophie's hand moved to her throat, the gesture she used when people asked questions she couldn't answer. "I asked you a question," the woman said, her voice rising. "Where are your parents? Why are you alone?" A waitress approached a heavy-set woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read, "Brenda." "Ma'am, is everything okay here?" "This child is bothering us," the mother said. "She just appeared out of nowhere. Look at her. She's filthy." Brenda turned to Sophie with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Honey, you can't just wander around bothering customers. Where's your family? Sophie wanted to scream. She wanted to open her mouth and let everything pour out the fire, the screaming, the smoke, the way her brother's hand had slipped from hers, the aunt who locked her in dark rooms, the cigarettes pressed to her skin when she cried. But the words wouldn't come. They never came. She simply turned and walked toward the back of the diner, past tables of people who looked away, past conversations that stopped and started, past a world that had decided she wasn't worth helping. And then she saw him. He sat alone in the corner booth, his back to the wall, his eyes scanning the room with the kind of awareness that came from years of watching for threats. He was in his early 40s, with short dark hair going gray at the temples and a scar that ran from his left eye down to his jaw. His shoulders were broad beneath a faded military jacket, and his hands, large scarred, capable, wrapped around a coffee cup he hadn't touched. But it wasn't the man that stopped Sophie in her tracks. It was the dog. The Belgian Malinois lay beneath the table, his amber coat gleaming in the diner's harsh light. He was lean and muscular, with alert ears and intelligent eyes that tracked every movement in the room. A service vest covered his chest, but something about the way he held himself suggested he had been more than a service dog once. Sophie had seen dogs like this before, in pictures, on the news. Dogs that jumped from helicopters. Dogs that found bombs. Dogs that saved soldiers. The dog's head lifted the moment Sophie stopped walking. His ears rotated toward her. His dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. And then he did something impossible. He stood up. He stepped out from beneath the table, and he walked directly toward her. "Ghost," the man said sharply. "Heel." The dog ignored him. Sophie's heart hammered as the massive animal approached. She had been taught to fear dogs. Her aunt kept 2 Rottweilers in the backyard, and she had seen what they did to the stray cat that wandered into the yard. But this dog moved differently, slowly, deliberately. His head lowered, his posture soft, as if he was trying to make himself smaller. He stopped directly in front of Sophie, and then gently, so gently she almost didn't feel it, he pressed his nose against her palm. "Ghost," the man said again, standing now, his voice tight with confusion. "What are you doing? Come here." The dog looked back at his handler. Then he looked at Sophie. And then he did something he had never done before in his 5 years of service, in all his deployments, in all his training. He sat down beside her. He leaned his body against her legs, and he refused to move. The man stared. Sophie could see the shock on his face, the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands flexed at his sides. "I'm sorry," he said, though his voice suggested he was more confused than apologetic. "He never does this. He's trained to stay with me. He's never—" Sophie didn't wait for him to finish. Her legs were shaking. Her hip was burning. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the diner was too warm after the cold outside, and she couldn't stand anymore. She walked past him to the booth. She slid onto the empty bench. And she put her head down on the table. Ghost followed her immediately. But he didn't lie on the floor. He jumped onto the bench, something his training explicitly forbade, and he pressed his body against her side. His head came to rest on her shoulder, his warmth seeping through her thin jacket. The man stood frozen for a long moment. Then slowly he sat back down across from her. "I'm Ryan," he said quietly. "Ryan Caldwell." Sophie didn't lift her head. She couldn't. If she lifted her head, she would have to look at him, and if she looked at him, she might hope, and hope was the most dangerous thing in the world. "Can you tell me your name?" No response. "Can you tell me where your parents are?" Her fingers curled into the fabric of her jacket. Ghost made a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and pressed closer. Ryan leaned back, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. He had spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, 12 of those in special operations. He had learned to read people the way most people read books, quickly, accurately, thoroughly. This child was terrified. But not of him. Not of the diner. She was terrified of something else, something that had been hunting her long before she walked through that door. "You're hungry," he said. It wasn't a question. Sophie's head lifted slightly, just enough for one eye to peek at him over her arm. "I'm going to order you some food," Ryan said. "You don't have to talk. You don't have to tell me anything. You can just eat." "Okay." Sophie stared at him. Then slowly she nodded. Ryan signaled Brenda, who approached with obvious reluctance. "Sir, I don't know if—" "Pancakes," Ryan said, cutting her off. "Scrambled eggs, bacon, orange juice, and whatever soup you've got." Brenda's mouth opened to protest, but something in Ryan's eyes made her think better of it. "Coming right up," she muttered, walking away. Ryan turned back to Sophie. Ghost was still pressed against her, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and steady. In all the years Ryan had worked with this dog, through 3 deployments, through countless operations, through a medical discharge that had nearly broken them both, he had never seen Ghost attach himself to anyone else. Until now. "He likes you," Ryan said softly. Sophie's hand moved tentatively to Ghost's head. Her fingers, small, dirty, trembling, touched his ear. Ghost's tail thumped once against the bench. Something cracked in Ryan's chest. Something he thought he had buried years ago. The food arrived quickly. Sophie stared at it like it might disappear, like it might be a trap, like someone might snatch it away if she reached for it. "It's yours," Ryan said. "Take your time." She didn't take her time. She ate like someone who had learned that food could be taken away at any moment. Her movements were frantic, desperate, her one hand moving from plate to mouth with practiced efficiency. Ryan watched without comment. He had seen soldiers eat like this after weeks in the field. He had seen refugees eat like this in camps overseas. He had never seen a child in America eat like this. Halfway through the pancakes, Sophie's sleeve rode up her arm. Ryan's eyes caught the movement, caught the flash of color against her pale skin. Bruises. Old ones fading to yellow. New ones still purple and blue. And something else. Burns. Small, circular burns. The kind made by cigarettes. Ryan's hands curled into fists beneath the table. "Sophie." The name slipped out before he could stop it. He didn't know how he knew it. Maybe he had heard someone say it. Maybe she had whispered it without realizing. But the moment he spoke, she froze. Her eyes met his. Wide. Terrified. Trapped. "That is your name, isn't it?" Ryan asked gently. "Sophie." For a long moment, nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "Sophie, those marks on your arm." She yanked her sleeve down so fast she nearly knocked over her orange juice. Ghost whined softly, pressing closer, his body a warm barrier between her and the world. "Okay," Ryan said, holding up his hands. "Okay, we don't have to talk about that. Not now." Sophie's breathing was ragged. Her eyes darted to the door, then to the window, then back to Ryan. She was calculating, measuring, deciding whether to run. "You're safe here," Ryan said. "Do you understand no one is going to hurt you? Not while I'm sitting here, not while Ghost is with you." Sophie's gaze dropped to the dog. Ghost looked back at her with those intelligent, ancient eyes. And something passed between them, something Ryan couldn't name, but could feel like static electricity, like the moment before a storm. Her shoulders dropped. Just slightly. Just enough. "I'm not going to ask you to tell me anything," Ryan said carefully. "But I am going to ask you one question. Just one. And you don't have to answer with words. You can nod or shake your head. Can you do that?" Sophie's chin dipped. "Are you safe at home?" The question hung in the air. Sophie's face went pale. Her hand found Ghost's fur and gripped it tight. She shook her head. Once. Twice. 3 times. Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Something that felt like the moment before a mission went wrong. "Is someone hurting you?" The tears came then. Silent tears that carved tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. She nodded a tiny, broken movement. "Who?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who's hurting you, Sophie?" Sophie's mouth opened. Her lips moved. For the first time in 8 months, she tried to speak. No sound came out. But Ryan could read lips. He had done it 100 times in situations where sound meant death. She was saying one word, over and over. "Aunt, aunt, aunt." The diner door burst open. A woman stood in the entrance, tall and angular, with blonde hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her face. She was in her 40s, dressed in expensive clothes that didn't match the fury in her eyes. Behind her, snow swirled in from the parking lot like a warning. "There you are," the woman hissed, her voice cutting through the diner's noise like a blade. "Do you have any idea how worried I've been?" Sophie made a sound. A small animal sound. The kind of sound Ryan had heard from soldiers who knew they were about to die. Ghost's head snapped up. His body tensed. A low growl built in his throat, a sound Ryan had only heard him make in combat. The woman stormed toward the booth, her heels cracking against the floor. "Get up, now. We're going home." Sophie shrank back against Ghost. Her eyes found Ryan's, and in them he saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Please," her eyes said. "Please don't let her take me." The woman reached for Sophie's arm. Ghost exploded. He lunged across the table, 90 pounds of muscle and fury. His teeth bared his bark, shattering the diner's silence. The woman stumbled backward with a scream, her hands raised to protect her face. "Control that animal!" she shrieked. "Someone call the police!" Ryan was on his feet instantly, one hand on Ghost's collar, his body positioned between the dog and the woman. "Ghost, stand down! Stand down!" Ghost stopped lunging, but the growl continued, a low, rumbling warning that vibrated through the floor. The woman straightened, her face twisted with rage. "I don't know who you think you are, but that child belongs to me. I'm her legal guardian, Vivian Cross, and if you don't hand her over right now, I'll have you arrested for kidnapping." Ryan didn't move. He looked at Sophie, at the terror on her face, at the way she clutched Ghost's vest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Then he looked at Vivian Cross, at the expensive clothes, at the cold eyes, at the barely concealed fury that seemed too intense for a worried guardian, that seemed more like the rage of someone whose plans had been interrupted. "She's not going anywhere with you," Ryan said quietly. "Excuse me. You heard me." Vivian's face went white, then red. "You have no right." "I have every right," Ryan said. "I'm a citizen. She's a child. And those burns on her arm weren't accidents." The diner had gone silent. Every eye was on them now. Brenda stood behind the counter with a phone in her hand, frozen, unsure who to call. Vivian's composure cracked. Just for a second. just long enough for Ryan to see the monster behind the mask. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice had changed. Softer now. Calculated. "Sophie is troubled. She hurts herself. The doctors have documented it." "I don't believe you." "Believe what you want. The law is on my side." She took a step forward. "Give me my niece. Now." Ryan didn't move. Sophie's hand found his, her small fingers wrapped around his scarred ones. Her grip was desperate pleading. And in that moment, Ryan Caldwell made a decision that would change everything. "No." The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "You're making a very big mistake." "Maybe," Ryan said. "But I've made mistakes before. Usually when I ignored my gut." And he squeezed Sophie's hand. "My gut's telling me something's very wrong here." "You'll hear from my lawyers." "I'll look forward to it." Vivian stood there for a long moment, her body trembling with barely contained rage. Then abruptly she turned and walked toward the door. She stopped at the threshold and looked back. "This isn't over," she said, her voice like ice. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." And then she was gone, the door slamming behind her, the snow swallowing her footsteps. Ryan stood motionless until the sound of her car engine faded into the distance. Then he looked down at Sophie. She was crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. But something else was there now, something he hadn't seen before. Hope. "You're going to be okay," Ryan said softly, kneeling so he was at her level. "I don't know how yet, but you're going to be okay." Sophie's lips moved. Still no sound, but Ryan could read them. Promise Ghost pressed his head against her shoulder, his eyes never leaving her face. "I promise," Ryan said. He didn't know then how hard that promise would be to keep. He didn't know about the insurance policy with Sophie's name on it. He didn't know about the fire that had killed her parents. He didn't know that Vivian Cross had murdered her own sister for money and was planning to kill Sophie next. He didn't know that by tomorrow he would be hunted by the police. All he knew was that this child needed someone to fight for her, and God help anyone who got in his way. Outside, the snow fell harder. The world disappeared into white. And in the back booth of the Pine Cone Diner, a broken Marine, a damaged dog, and a silent little girl sat together in the wreckage of everything they had lost, waiting for what would come next. Ryan pulled his truck onto the highway, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Sophie sat in the passenger seat, Ghost wedged between her and the door despite the cramped space. The dog hadn't left her side since they walked out of the diner, and Ryan had stopped trying to command him otherwise. "We're going to my place," Ryan said, keeping his voice steady. "It's outside of town. Quiet, safe." Sophie didn't respond. Her eyes stayed fixed on the side mirror, watching the road behind them as if she expected something to appear. "She can't follow us," Ryan said. "Not tonight. She doesn't know where I live." Sophie's hand found Ghost's ear and squeezed gently. Ryan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. "Hold on," he muttered, pulling it out. 12 missed calls, all from the same number. Flagstaff Police Department. His stomach dropped. The phone rang again. This time he answered. "Mr. Caldwell." A woman's voice, professional but cold. "This is Detective Nina Reyes with Flagstaff PD. We need to speak with you immediately." "About what?" "About the child you took from the Pine Cone Diner. Her guardian has filed a report. She's claiming kidnapping." Ryan's jaw tightened. "That woman is abusing her. The child has burns on her arms, bruises everywhere." Sir, I understand you believe that, but you can't just take someone's child. She's not her child. She's her niece, and she's terrified of her. A pause. Mr. Caldwell, where are you right now? Ryan glanced at Sophie. Her eyes had gone wide. She could hear the voice through the phone, and her whole body had started trembling. I'm not telling you that. Sir, if you don't cooperate. Detective, I spent 20 years protecting this country. I know what abuse looks like, I know what fear looks like, and I know when something's wrong. He took a breath. Give me 24 hours. That's all I'm asking. 24 hours to prove what that woman is. Silence on the line. 12, the detective finally said. You have 12 hours. Then I'm coming for you whether you like it or not. The line went dead. Ryan shoved the phone back in his pocket and pressed harder on the gas. Sophie was staring at him now, her face pale in the dashboard light. It's okay, he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. We just need to move fast. 20 minutes later, they reached the cabin. It sat at the end of a dirt road surrounded by pines, invisible from the main highway. Ryan had bought it 3 years ago, after his discharge, after his wife left, after everything fell apart. It was supposed to be a place to disappear. Now it was a fortress. He carried Sophie inside. She weighed almost nothing light as a bundle of sticks and set her on the couch. Ghost jumped up immediately, curling his body around hers like a living blanket. I need to make a call, Ryan said. Will you be okay for a minute? Sophie's hand moved to Ghost's ear. She squeezed once. Ryan took that as a yes. He stepped into the kitchen and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Caldwell. Been a while. Carlos, I need help. Carlos Vega had served with Ryan in Afghanistan. 3 tours, countless missions brothers in everything but blood. After they got out, Carlos became a private investigator, the kind who didn't ask too many questions and always got answers. What kind of help? The kind that needs to happen tonight. Ryan explained everything. The girl, the diner, the aunt, the burns. By the time he finished, Carlos was already typing. Vivian Cross, Carlos repeated. Flagstaff address. I don't know, but the kid's name is Sophie Miller. Parents are dead. There was a fire about 14 months ago. More typing. Then silence. Ryan, Carlos said slowly. You sitting down? Just tell me. The fire that killed Sophie's parents. It was ruled accidental. Faulty wiring in the garage. But there were questions. The insurance company fought the claim for months. What kind of questions? The fire started at 2 a.m. Both parents were home. Sophie and her baby brother were upstairs. The mother made it to the kids' room, got Sophie out a window. Then she went back for the boy. Carlos paused. She never came back out. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. The father was found near the garage door. Smoke inhalation. But here's the thing, there were traces of accelerant. Not enough to prove arson, but enough to raise flags. Who inherited? That's where it gets ugly. The parents had life insurance, $500,000 each. Beneficiary was supposed to be the kids held in trust until they turned 18. But 2 weeks after the fire, the trust was dissolved. Legal guardian took control of the funds. Vivian Cross. Bingo. And it gets worse. Sophie lost her arm in that fire. She was trapped when part of the ceiling collapsed. The aunt was first on scene. Neighbors said she got there before the fire department. She could have pulled Sophie out sooner. Could have tried for the brother. But she didn't. She waited. Witnesses said she just stood there watching. Didn't move until the cameras showed up. Ryan felt sick. There's more, Carlos said. I pulled Vivian's records. She's had 2 other foster children in the past decade. Both were removed by CPS. Both had injuries that were ruled accidental. One of them died 6 months after leaving her care. Hit by a car. Driver was never found. Ryan walked to the doorway and looked at Sophie. She was asleep now, Ghost's head on her chest, her hand still tangled in his fur. She looked so small, so fragile. "Carlos, I need everything you can find. Insurance policies, bank records, anything." "I'm already on it, but Ryan, there's one more thing." "What?" Vivian took out a new insurance policy 3 months ago. Life insurance. $500,000. On who? On Sophie. The words hit like a bullet. "She's going to kill her," Ryan said. "That's the plan. That's always been the plan. You need to get that kid somewhere safe, somewhere Vivian can't find her." "I know. And you need evidence, real evidence, something that'll stick in court." "I know. 12 hours isn't much time. Then I'd better not waste any." Ryan hung up and walked back to the living room. Sophie was still asleep, but Ghost's eyes were open, watching him with that uncanny intelligence. "I know, boy," Ryan murmured. "I know." He pulled a chair close to the couch and sat down. He wouldn't sleep tonight. He couldn't, not with what he knew now. Sophie woke 2 hours later with a scream trapped in her throat. Her body jerked upright, her one arm flailing, her eyes wild with terror. Ghost was on her, instantly pressing his weight against her chest, licking her face, making soft whining sounds. "Easy," Ryan said, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle her. "Easy. You're safe. You're with me. Remember?" Sophie's breathing was ragged. Tears streamed down her face. She looked around the room frantically, searching for something or someone. "She's not here," Ryan said firmly. "Your aunt is not here. She can't get to you." Sophie's hand found Ghost and gripped his fur so hard her knuckles went white. "I need to ask you some questions," Ryan said gently. "I know you can't speak, but you can answer. 1 squeeze on Ghost's ear for yes, 1 touch on his paw for no." "Okay." Sophie hesitated. Then she squeezed Ghost's ear. "Good. That's good." Ryan leaned forward. "Did your aunt hurt you?" "Ear squeeze. Yes." "Did she give you those burns on your arm?" "Ear squeeze. Yes." "Sophie, the fire that killed your parents, do you remember it?" Her whole body went rigid. Ghost whined and pressed closer. "I'm sorry," Ryan said quickly. "I'm sorry. We don't have to." Sophie's hand moved. "Ear squeeze." Yes. She remembered. "Did your aunt start that fire?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled. Her hand moved to Ghost's ear and squeezed once, then again, then again. Yes, yes, yes. Ryan felt the air leave his lungs. "Did she try to hurt you in the fire?" Sophie's hand moved to Ghost's paw. "No. She didn't try to hurt you." "Ear squeeze?" "No, wait." Sophie's face twisted with frustration. She was trying to communicate something more complicated, something that yes and no couldn't capture. Okay, Ryan said. "Let me think. She didn't hurt you in the fire, but did she let you get hurt? Did she wait? When she could have helped you sooner? Ear squeeze? Yes. And your brother?" Sophie made a sound. A horrible broken sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a scream. Ghost started whining louder, pawing at her face. "I'm sorry," Ryan said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Sophie." She buried her face in Ghost's fur and cried. Ryan sat there helplessly watching this child shake apart, knowing there was nothing he could say to make it better. When the tears finally stopped, Sophie lifted her head. Her face was red and swollen, but her eyes had changed. Something harder there now. Something determined. She pulled away from Ghost and looked around the room. Her gaze landed on a pad of paper on the coffee table. A pen beside it. She pointed. Ryan handed them to her. Sophie gripped the pen awkwardly in her left hand. She was still learning to write, since losing her right arm, and started to draw. Ryan watched as shapes emerged. A woman with sharp features and pulled back hair. A car. A winding road. And at the edge of the paper, a cliff. A steep drop into nothing. Sophie finished and held up the picture. "What is this?" Ryan asked carefully. Sophie pointed to the woman, then squeezed Ghost's ear. "Vivian." She pointed to herself, then to the back seat of the car. "Sophie." She pointed to the cliff. Ryan's blood ran cold. "Sophie, is this something that already happened, or something she's planning?" Sophie's hand moved to Ghost's ear and squeezed. "Planning. She's planning to drive you off a cliff." Ear squeeze. "Yes." "How do you know?" Sophie's hand trembled as she picked up the pen again. She wrote 3 words, shaky and uneven. "I heard her." "You heard her talking about it on the phone." Ear squeeze. "Yes." "When?" Sophie held up one finger. 1 week ago." Ryan stood up so fast he knocked the chair over. He paced across the room, his mind racing. "That's why you ran," he said. "That's why you came to the diner. You weren't just running from abuse, you were running for your life." Sophie nodded, tears streaming again. "And she found you. She found you at the diner." Ryan's hands curled into fists. "She wasn't just coming to take you home. She was coming to finish it." Ear squeeze. "Yes." Ghost growled softly as if he understood. Ryan pulled out his phone and dialed Carlos again. "Tell me you found something." "I found a lot of things." "Where do you want me to start?" "The insurance policy. Is there a clause about accidental death?" "Triple payout. If Sophie dies in an accident, Vivian gets $1.5 million. And if Vivian is implicated, then she gets nothing. The policy has a murder exclusion. If she's charged with Sophie's death, the insurance company keeps every cent. So she needs it to look like an accident." "Exactly. A car going off a cliff in a snowstorm, tragic. Unprovable. The perfect crime." Ryan looked at Sophie. At this 7-year-old girl who had already survived so much, who had watched her parents die, lost her brother, lost her arm, and still found the strength to run when death came knocking. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Ryan said. "What's your play?" "I'm going to get her to confess." "How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." "Ryan, be careful. This woman has killed before. She won't hesitate to kill again." "Neither will I." He hung up and turned to Sophie. "I need you to trust me," he said. "Can you do that?" Sophie looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Ghost. The dog met her eyes with that strange, deep intelligence. She squeezed his ear. "Yes." "Good. Because tomorrow we're going to end this, one way or another." The cabin fell silent. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. Sophie lay back down on the couch, Ghost pressed against her, her eyes slowly closing despite her fear. Ryan sat in the chair and watched her sleep. He thought about his own daughter, the one he'd lost to his ex-wife's custody, the one who didn't return his calls anymore, the one who had grown up without him while he was overseas fighting wars that never seemed to end. He hadn't been able to save her. But maybe he could save this one. At 3 a.m., Ghost's head snapped up. The movement was so sudden that Ryan's hand went to his hip, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Ghost was staring at the window, his body rigid, a low growl building in his throat. "What is it, boy?" Ryan whispered. He moved to the window and peered through the curtain. A car sat at the end of his driveway, headlights off, engine running, a dark shape behind the wheel barely visible through the falling snow. Ryan's heart hammered. They had found him. He didn't know how. Maybe Vivian had connections. Maybe she'd traced his license plate. Maybe she'd hired someone. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she knew where he was. And she had come for Sophie. Ghost was at the door now, teeth bared, his growl growing louder. Sophie stirred on the couch, her eyes fluttering open. "Don't move," Ryan said quietly. "Stay down. Stay quiet." He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, but the call wouldn't connect. No signal. The storm had taken out the tower, or someone had blocked it. The car at the end of the driveway turned off its engine. A door opened. A figure stepped out into the snow and started walking toward the cabin. Ryan grabbed the fireplace poker and positioned himself between the door and the couch, where Sophie lay frozen. Ghost had stopped growling. The silence was worse. The footsteps crunched through the snow, slow and deliberate. Then they stopped. A knock. 3 sharp raps. "Mr. Caldwell." A woman's voice, but not Vivian's. "This is Detective Nina Reyes. I know you're in there. Open the door." Ryan's grip on the poker tightened. "How did you find me? Your truck has GPS. The dealership never disabled it." A pause. "I'm alone. I just want to talk." "You said I had 12 hours. That was before Vivian Cross filed an emergency custody motion. A judge signed it 20 minutes ago. I don't have a choice anymore." Ryan looked at Sophie. She was sitting up now. Ghost pressed against her, her face white with terror. "She's going to kill her," Ryan said through the door. "You don't understand what's happening here." "Then help me understand. Open the door, Mr. Caldwell. Let's talk like rational people." Ryan closed his eyes. He had 2 options: fight and become a fugitive with a traumatized child, or cooperate and pray that this detective was one of the good ones. He made his choice. The door swung open. Nina Reyes stood on the porch, her badge visible on her belt, her hands empty and raised slightly. She was in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that held more exhaustion than hostility. "Can I come in?" Ryan stepped aside. Reyes entered slowly, her gaze moving from Ryan to Ghost, to the small figure huddled on the couch. When she saw Sophie, something flickered across her face, something that looked like recognition. "Sophie Miller?" Reyes asked softly. Sophie shrank back, pressing harder against Ghost. "She doesn't speak," Ryan said. "Hasn't for 8 months." "I know." Reyes moved closer, then stopped when Ghost's ears flattened. "I read her file on the drive up. Trauma-induced mutism following the death of her parents and brother." She crouched slowly, making herself smaller. "Sophie, my name is Nina. I'm a police officer. I'm not here to hurt you." Sophie's eyes darted to Ryan. "It's okay," he said, though his gut was screaming otherwise. "Just listen to what she has to say." Reyes pulled something from her pocket, a photograph creased and worn. She held it up so Sophie could see. "This was my daughter," Reyes said quietly. "Her name was Maria. She died 8 years ago. She was 6. Sophie's trembling slowed, just slightly. Someone was supposed to protect her, Reyes continued. They didn't. And I've spent every day since trying to make sure that never happens to another child. She lowered the photo. I believe you, Sophie. I believe something bad is happening, but I need you to help me prove it. Sophie looked at Ghost. The dog looked back at her with those ancient, knowing eyes. Then slowly, Sophie squeezed his ear. Yes. Reyes let out a breath. Okay, that's good. She stood and turned to Ryan. Here's the problem. The judge signed an emergency order. Legally, I have to return Sophie to her guardian's custody while we investigate. That's a death sentence. I know how it sounds. No, you don't. Ryan grabbed the drawing Sophie had made and thrust it at Reyes. Look at this. That's Vivian. That's Sophie. That's a cliff. She's planning to kill her and make it look like an accident. Sophie heard her on the phone. Reyes studied the drawing. Her jaw tightened. Even if I believe you and I do, I can't ignore a court order. I could lose my badge. I could go to jail. So you're just going to hand her over. Let her die. I'm going to do my job. Reyes met his eyes. But my job isn't just following orders. My job is protecting children. And I'm very good at my job. She pulled out her phone and made a call. This is Reyes. I need a welfare check on Sophie Miller immediate. I want eyes on that child every hour until we complete our investigation. No exceptions. She hung up and looked at Ryan. That's the best I can do right now. Sophie goes back to her aunt's house, but she won't be alone. I'll have officers checking on her constantly. And in the meantime, I'm going to dig into Vivian Cross's past until I find what I need. It won't be enough. It has to be. Reyes crouched down again, meeting Sophie's eyes. I need you to be brave for a little longer. Can you do that? Can you be brave? Sophie's chin trembled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But she squeezed Ghost's ear. Yes. Good girl. Reyes stood. We leave in 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes were the longest of Ryan's life. He knelt in front of Sophie and took her hand, the only one she had left, in both of his. I'm going to find a way to get you out of this, he said. I promise. I don't know how yet, but I will. Sophie's lips moved. No sound came out, but Ryan could read them. Don't let her take me. I have to, Ryan said, his voice cracking. For now I have to. But this isn't the end. Do you understand? This isn't goodbye. Ghost whined and pushed his head between them, licking Sophie's face. He's going with you, Ryan said. I'll make sure of it. Reyes looked up from her phone. Sir, I can't authorize a dog in protective. Then I don't cooperate. Ryan's voice went flat. The dog stays with her, or this becomes a very different conversation. Reyes hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. Fine. The dog goes with her. They walked out to Reyes's car. The snow had stopped, but the cold was brutal. Sophie climbed into the back seat, Ghost jumping in after her. She pressed her face to the window as the door closed. Ryan stood in the driveway watching. Don't let her take me. He would carry those words for the rest of his life. The drive to Vivian's house took 45 minutes. Sophie sat motionless the entire time, Ghost's head in her lap, her eyes fixed on nothing. Reyes tried to make conversation once or twice, but gave up when she got no response. The house was a 2-story structure at the end of a quiet street. White siding, black shutters, a garden gnome by the mailbox. It looked normal. It looked safe. It was neither. Vivian stood on the porch, arms crossed, her face arranged in an expression of worried relief. Beside her stood a man Sophie had never seen before. He was big with a shaved head and small eyes that tracked movement like a predator. "Sophie, sweetheart." Vivian rushed forward as the car stopped. "Thank God you're okay. I've been so worried." She reached for the door. Ghost lunged at the window, barking furiously. Vivian jumped back. "What the hell is that thing?" "Service dog," Reyes said, stepping out of the car. "He stays with the child." "Absolutely not. I'm allergic. That animal is not coming into my home." "Then we have a problem." Reyes's voice hardened. "The dog stays with Sophie, or Sophie doesn't leave my custody." Vivian's mask slipped. Just for a second. Just enough for Reyes to see the rage beneath the concern. "Fine," Vivian said through clenched teeth. "But if that beast causes any damage, he won't." Reyes opened the back door. Sophie didn't move. "Come on, sweetheart," Vivian cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Let's get you inside. You must be exhausted." Sophie looked at Reyes with those huge, terrified eyes. "Please." Reyes crouched down. "Remember what I said. Be brave. I'm going to check on you every hour. Every single hour. You're not alone." Sophie's hand found Ghost's fur. She gripped it tight. Then slowly she climbed out of the car. Vivian's hand clamped onto Sophie's shoulder. The girl flinched. "Say thank you to the nice detective," Vivian said. Sophie didn't speak. She never spoke. "She's still not talking." Vivian sighed dramatically. "I've told the therapists over and over that something is wrong with this child. No one listens." Ghost growled. "Control that animal," Vivian snapped. "Sophie," Reyes said carefully, "you call 911 if anything happens. Anything at all. Do you understand?" Sophie nodded once. Then Vivian pulled her toward the house, and the door closed behind them. Reyes stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, staring at that door. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. But feeling wasn't evidence. Feeling didn't hold up in court. She pulled out her phone and dialed. "I need a record search on Marcus Webb. He's connected to Vivian Cross somehow. And I need it now." Inside the house, the atmosphere changed the moment the door closed. Vivian's grip on Sophie's shoulder tightened to the point of pain. She spun the girl around her face, contorted with fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused me?" Sophie tried to pull away. Vivian's nails dug in. 8 months I've been patient with you. 8 months I've fed you, clothed, you kept you alive when everyone else would have dumped you in foster care." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And this is how you repay me." Ghost started barking. Vivian kicked at him, but he dodged, positioning himself between her and Sophie. The man from the porch appeared in the doorway. "Marcus. Want me to deal with the dog?" "Not yet." Vivian released Sophie's shoulder and stepped back, composing herself. "The cops are watching. We have to be smart." She looked at Sophie with cold, calculating eyes. "Change of plans, sweetheart. We're going on a little trip tomorrow. Just you and me. Won't that be nice?" Sophie's blood turned to ice. "Marcus, put her in the basement and lock up that damn dog in the garage." "No." The word came from Sophie's mouth before she could stop it. Vivian froze. Marcus froze. Even Ghost went silent. "What did you say?" Sophie's heart hammered. She hadn't spoken in 8 months. The word had torn from her throat like broken glass. "She speaks," Vivian said slowly. "After all this time, she finally speaks." A cruel smile spread across her face. "Well, isn't that something?" She grabbed Sophie by the arm and dragged her toward the basement door. "Too bad no one's going to believe a word you say." The basement was dark and cold. Sophie sat on the concrete floor, her back against the wall, listening to Ghost bark somewhere above her. They had muzzled him and locked him in the garage. She could hear him throwing himself against the door. She wrapped her arm around her knees and tried not to cry. She had spoken. After all these months of silence, she had finally spoken. And it hadn't mattered. Nothing she said mattered. No one who could help her was going to hear. The hours crawled by. She heard footsteps above, heard Vivian and Marcus talking in low voices, heard the words tomorrow and early and hiking trail and accident. They were going to kill her tomorrow. She was going to die. She closed her eyes and thought about Ghost, about the way he had wrapped himself around her in the diner, about the way he had looked at her like she was worth protecting, about the way he had growled at Vivian, at Marcus, at anyone who came too close. He was the first living thing that had fought for her since her parents died. She couldn't let him down. Upstairs, Ghost had stopped barking, but he hadn't stopped trying. The garage door was solid wood reinforced with metal. He had thrown himself against it 100 times, feeling the impact shudder through his bones. His shoulder ached. His paws were raw. But the door didn't move. The window. He turned and looked at the small window high on the garage wall. It was narrow, barely wide enough for a dog his size. And it was covered with wire mesh. But wire mesh could be broken. Ghost backed up to the far wall. He measured the distance with his eyes the way he had been trained to measure distances before a jump. Then he ran. He hit the wall, pushed off, and launched himself at the window. His body crashed through the glass and mesh together, shards slicing into his chest and legs. He landed hard on the frozen ground outside, rolled, and came up running. Blood streamed from a dozen cuts. He didn't care. Sophie needed him. He ran through the night, following her scent, following the pull in his chest that had been there since the moment he saw her in that diner. 12 miles of frozen roads and snow-covered fields. His paws left bloody prints in the white. He didn't stop. Back at his cabin, Ryan's phone rang at 4 a.m. It was Carlos. "I found something." "What?" "Marcus Webb. He's Vivian's boyfriend. They've been together for 2 years, but he keeps a low profile. No social media, no public records." Carlos paused. "Except one." "Tell me." 8 years ago, Marcus was questioned in connection with a hit-and-run in Phoenix. A 6-year-old girl was killed. Charges were never filed. Ryan's blood ran cold. "What was the girl's name?" "Maria. Maria Reyes." Oh, God. It gets worse. The detective who questioned him back then. Her name was Nina Reyes. It was her daughter. Ryan grabbed his keys and ran for the door. Detective Reyes was already at Vivian's house when Ryan arrived, but she wasn't there for Sophie. She was there for Marcus Webb. She had gotten Carlos's message 10 minutes earlier. 10 minutes of her whole world tilting sideways as she realized the man who killed her daughter was standing inside that house. She pounded on the door. "Police, open up." No response. "Open the door or I'm coming through it." The door swung open. Vivian stood there in a bathrobe, her expression perfectly innocent. "Detective, it's 5 in the morning. What's going on? Where is he? Who?" "Marcus Webb, the man who killed my daughter." Vivian's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." Reyes pushed past her into the house. "Marcus, I know you're here." You can't do this, Vivian shouted. You don't have a warrant. I have probable cause. That's all I need. She found him in the kitchen trying to slip out the back door. She tackled him before he made it 3 steps. You think I forgot your face, she snarled, pressing him into the floor. You think I stopped looking for you for 1 single day. I don't know what you're talking about. Maria Reyes, Phoenix, 8 years ago. You hit her with your car and drove away. That wasn't me. Your DNA was on the bumper. The only reason you walked was because someone paid off a witness. She yanked his arms behind his back. Was it Vivian? Did she make it all go away? Vivian appeared in the doorway. This is insane. You're insane. I'm calling my lawyer. Call whoever you want. Reyes cuffed Marcus and stood up. Where's Sophie? Vivian's expression flickered. In her room. Sleeping. Show me. Detective, this is harassment. Show me, now. Vivian hesitated. Then she walked toward the hallway, her movements stiff. The bedroom door was open. The bed was empty. She must have gone to the bathroom, Vivian said quickly. Sophie, where are you? Reyes's eyes swept the room. Something was wrong. The window was locked from the inside. The closet was empty. Where is she, Vivian? I told you she must be. A crash from the basement. Then a bark. Then a scream. Sophie's scream. Reyes ran. She hit the basement door and found it locked. She kicked it once, twice, 3 times. The wood splintered and gave way. The basement was dark except for a single bulb. Ghost stood in the center of the room, blood matting his fur, his body positioned between Sophie and the broken window he had come through. Sophie was backed against the wall, her face streaked with tears, her arm wrapped around herself. But she was alive. Ghost had found her. Sophie, Reyes rushed forward. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Sophie's mouth opened, and this time words came out. She was going to kill me. Her voice was hoarse and broken, unused for so long. Tomorrow. The cliff. Like the drawing. Reyes's eyes filled with tears. I know, baby. I know. It's over now. Behind them, footsteps on the stairs. Ryan appeared breathing hard, Carlos right behind him. Sophie, Ryan said. Thank God. Sophie broke away from Reyes and ran to him, throwing her arm around his waist, burying her face in his chest. You came, she whispered. You came back. I told you I would. Ryan held her tight, his voice cracking. I told you this wasn't goodbye. Ghost limped over and pressed his body against both of them, his tail wagging weakly despite the blood. Upstairs they heard Vivian shouting, This is unlawful. You can't prove anything. Carlos looked at Reyes. The insurance policy. The phone records. It's all documented. Reyes nodded slowly. Then let's finish this. They climbed the stairs together. Vivian was in the living room, her face twisted with fury, her eyes wild. You have nothing, she spat. Nothing. We have Sophie's testimony, Reyes said. We have the insurance policy you took out 3 months ago. We have the drawing she made of your plan to drive her off a cliff. The word of a mentally disturbed child, it'll never hold up. We also have Marcus. Reyes smiled coldly. And something tells me he's going to have a lot to say once he realizes you're going to let him take the fall alone. Vivian's face went white. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, Reyes said, reaching for her cuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Vivian bolted. She ran through the kitchen out the back door toward her car in the driveway. Ryan started after her, but he wasn't fast enough. Ghost was. Despite his injuries, despite the blood still streaming from his cuts, the Belgian Malinois shot through the house like a bullet. He caught up to Vivian just as she reached her car door. He didn't bite. He didn't attack. He simply stood in front of her car and refused to move. Vivian jumped in the driver's seat and started the engine. She put the car in reverse. Ghost didn't flinch. "Move!" Vivian screamed. "Move, you stupid animal!" Ghost stared at her with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Move me," they seemed to say. "I dare you." She revved the engine. Her foot hovered over the gas. And then the sirens came. Blue and red lights cutting through the early morning darkness. 3 patrol cars blocking the end of the driveway. Vivian's hand fell from the gear shift. It was over. Ghost stood his ground until the officers pulled Vivian from the car. Then finally his legs gave out. He collapsed on the cold pavement, his chest heaving, his eyes closing. Sophie screamed, "Ghost! Ghost, no!" She ran to him, falling to her knees beside him, her hand pressing against his bloody fur. "Don't die," she begged, her voice raw. "Please don't die. You saved me. You can't die." Ghost's eyes opened. He looked at her, and slowly, weakly, his tail thumped against the ground. "We need a vet," Ryan shouted. "Now!" They loaded Ghost into Reyes's car and raced toward the emergency animal hospital. Sophie held him the entire way, her face pressed against his neck, whispering words she hadn't spoken in 8 months. "You're going to be okay. You're the bravest dog in the whole world. You came back for me. You came back." Ghost's tail kept wagging. Whatever happened next, he had done what he was trained to do. He had protected his person, no matter the cost. The emergency veterinary hospital was a blur of white walls and sharp smells. Sophie sat in the waiting room, her body folded into a plastic chair, her eyes fixed on the double doors where they had taken Ghost. Ryan sat beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, feeling her tremble with each passing minute. "He's strong," Ryan said quietly. "He survived Afghanistan. He survived things most dogs never see." Sophie didn't respond. Her lips moved silently, forming the same word over and over. Ghost, ghost, ghost. The doors swung open. A woman in blue scrubs walked toward them, her face unreadable. Ryan stood immediately, positioning himself between Sophie and whatever news was coming. "Are you the owner?" "I am." "Your dog lost a lot of blood. The lacerations on his chest were deep, and he has significant tissue damage to his front legs." She paused. "We've stabilized him, but the next 24 hours are critical." Sophie made a sound, a small wounded sound that cut through Ryan like a knife. "Can she see him?" Ryan asked. The vet hesitated. "He's sedated. He won't be responsive. She needs to see him." Something in Ryan's voice made the vet reconsider. She looked at Sophie, at the way the child was gripping the chair arm with her only hand, at the desperate hope in her eyes. "5 minutes," the vet said. "That's all I can give you." They followed her through the double doors and down a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Ghost lay on a metal table, his amber coat matted with dried blood, white bandages wrapped around his chest and legs. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. Sophie broke away from Ryan and ran to the table. She pressed her face against Ghost's neck, her tears soaking into his fur. "You came back for me," she whispered. "You came back." Ghost's tail twitched. Once, twice. The smallest movement. "He knows you're here," the vet said softly. "Even sedated, he knows." Sophie lifted her head. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears, but something had changed in her expression. Something fierce. "He's not going to die," she said. Her voice was stronger now, clearer. "He's not." Ryan felt his throat tighten. This was the most she had spoken in 8 months, and she was using those precious words to fight for the dog who had fought for her. No, Ryan agreed. He's not. They stayed until the vet gently ushered them out. Sophie didn't want to leave, but Ryan promised her they would come back. Every day. As many times as they needed. In the waiting room, Detective Reyes was waiting for them. "How is he?" she asked. "Fighting." Ryan guided Sophie to a chair. "What's happening with Vivian?" "She's in custody. So is Marcus." Reyes sat down across from them, her face exhausted, but determined. "But we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Her lawyer showed up an hour ago. He's already claiming Sophie's testimony is unreliable. A traumatized child who didn't speak for 8 months suddenly starts talking. He says it's coached, fabricated." Sophie's head snapped up. "I'm not lying." Reyes leaned forward. "I know you're not, sweetheart. But the defense is going to try everything to discredit you. They're going to say you're confused, that you don't remember things correctly, that the trauma made you imagine things. I didn't imagine the burns on my arm. I didn't imagine the basement. I didn't imagine her saying she was going to drive me off a cliff." "I believe you. But believing isn't enough. We need evidence." Ryan's jaw tightened. "What about the insurance policy? The phone records? Circumstantial. Her lawyer is arguing that taking out life insurance on a dependent is normal, that the phone calls were about financial planning. That's insane." "That's the legal system." Reyes rubbed her temples. "We need something concrete, something that proves intent." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke again, her voice small but steady. "There's a recording." Ryan and Reyes both froze. "What? On her phone?" Sophie's hand trembled. "She records everything. She thinks people are always trying to cheat her. She recorded a call with Marcus where they talked about the accident, how to make it look real." Reyes grabbed Sophie's shoulders. "Are you sure you're absolutely sure?" Sophie nodded. "I heard her play it back once. She was laughing." Reyes was on her feet, instantly, phone already in hand. "I need a warrant for Vivian Cross's phone. Priority. And I need forensics ready to pull every deleted file." She walked away, speaking rapidly into the phone. Ryan looked at Sophie with something like wonder. "You remembered that all this time? I remember everything." Sophie's voice cracked. "I remember the fire. I remember my mom going back for Jamie. I remember waiting for her to come back out." Tears streamed down her face. "I remember Vivian standing there, watching, not moving." Ryan pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. 8 months of silence. 8 months of carrying these memories alone. And now finally, she was letting them out. "It's not your fault," Ryan said into her hair. "None of this is your fault. I should have saved him. Jamie, I should have gone back." "You were 6 years old. You couldn't have saved anyone." "But I tried." Sophie's voice broke into sobs. "I tried to go back, but the ceiling fell, and my arm, and then she was there, and she just looked at me. She looked at me like I was in the way." Ryan held her tighter. He thought about all the children he had seen in war zones, children who had lost everything, and still somehow found the strength to survive. Sophie was one of them. A survivor. A fighter. "You're the bravest person I've ever met," he said. "Do you know that—" Sophie pulled back, her face blotchy and swollen. "I don't feel brave." "Brave people never do." 3 days later, they found the recording. It was buried deep in Vivian's phone, hidden in a folder labeled Recipes. Forensics recovered it, along with dozens of other files she had tried to delete. Ryan stood in Reyes's office as she played it back. Vivian's voice came through first cold and businesslike. The trail is perfect. Sharp turn, no guardrail. One wrong move, and the car goes over. Then Marcus. What about the kid? She might try to jump out. She won't. She can barely walk with that prosthetic. And even if she tries, who's going to believe her a mute child who doesn't speak? She probably won't even scream on the way down. Laughter. Both of them laughing. Reyes stopped the recording. Her hands were shaking. That's enough for murder conspiracy, she said. That's enough for everything. Ryan felt something loosen in his chest. What happens now? Now we build the case. Vivian and Marcus are both being charged with conspiracy to commit murder. But there's more. Reyes pulled out a file. Carlos was right about the fire. We found accelerant traces that were missed in the original investigation. And we found a witness. A witness, a neighbor. He saw Vivian's car at the house the night of the fire. She told police she was at a conference in Phoenix, but her car was there at 2 a.m., right when the fire started. Ryan's blood ran cold. She started it. She killed Sophie's parents. We can't prove that yet, but we can prove she lied about her alibi, and combined with everything else. Reyes closed the file. She's going away for a very long time. What about Sophie? Reyes hesitated. That's the other thing we need to talk about. Ryan's stomach dropped. What? Sophie has no living relatives. Once this case is closed, she becomes a ward of the state. Foster care. No. Ryan, no. He stood up, his hands flat on the desk. That child is not going into the system, not after everything she's been through. What's the alternative, you? Reyes's voice softened. Ryan, I know you care about her, but you're a single man with PTSD and a medical discharge. The courts aren't going to just hand you custody. Then I'll fight for it. It could take months, years, and in the meantime, I said no. Ryan's voice cracked. That girl trusted me. She chose me. When every other person in that diner turned her away, she came to me. And I'm not going to abandon her now. Reyes was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I'll see what I can do. I know a family court judge. She owes me a favor. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Ryan thought about the wars he had fought, the friends he had lost, the nights he had spent alone wondering if anything he had done had mattered. No, he said. It's going to be the most important thing I've ever done. Ghost came home 4 days later. Sophie was waiting at the door of Ryan's cabin when the truck pulled up. She had barely slept, barely eaten, her whole existence focused on the moment when she would see her dog again. Ryan carried Ghost inside the dog, still weak, but alert. His bandages were fresh, his fur clean, his eyes bright with recognition. Sophie dropped to her knees. Ghost. The dog's tail wagged. Slowly at first, then faster. He pulled himself out of Ryan's arms and limped toward Sophie, collapsing against her, his head in her lap. I missed you, Sophie whispered. I missed you so much. Ghost licked her sen. Once. Twice. 3 times. Ryan stood back and watched them, his throat tight, his eyes burning. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of love. The court date came faster than anyone expected. Sophie sat in the witness box, her hand gripping Ryan's under the table, her eyes fixed on the woman across the courtroom. Vivian Cross looked different in her orange jumpsuit, smaller, somehow diminished. But her eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. Dangerous. Sophie, the prosecutor said gently, Can you tell the court what happened on the night of the fire? Sophie took a deep breath. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. I woke up because I smelled smoke. My mom came into my room and picked me up. She carried me to the window and dropped me onto the roof of the porch. She told me to climb down and run. And then she went back for my brother, Jamie. Sophie's chin quivered. I waited for her to come back out, but she didn't. Did you see anyone else that night? Yes. Sophie's eyes moved to Vivian. My aunt. She was standing in the driveway, watching. Did she try to help? No, she just stood there. Sophie's voice hardened. The ceiling fell on me. My arm was trapped. I was screaming for help, and she just stood there. The courtroom was silent. Sophie, the prosecutor continued, did your aunt ever talk about wanting to hurt you? Yes. I heard her on the phone. She said when I was gone, she would finally be free. She said everything would be hers. And the drawing you made, the one with the car and the cliff, that was her plan. Sophie's voice cracked. She was going to drive me up to the hiking trail and push the car over the edge. She thought no one would ever know. How do you know this? Because I heard her. She and Marcus talked about it when they thought I was asleep. Sophie's hand tightened on Ryan's. They laughed about it. Vivian's lawyer stood up. Objection. This is hearsay from a traumatized child who, Your Honor, the prosecutor interrupted. We have a recording that corroborates every word of this testimony. The recording played. Vivian's voice filled the courtroom, clinical and cruel, planning the death of a 7-year-old girl. When it ended, several jurors were crying. One final question, Sophie. The prosecutor crouched so she was at eye level. How did you survive? What kept you going all those months? Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she pointed. Not at Ryan, not at Reyes, at Ghost. The Belgian Malinois sat in the gallery. Special permission granted his body pressed against the bench where Ryan would have been sitting. His eyes were fixed on Sophie, his ears forward, his whole being focused on her. He found me, Sophie said, her voice breaking. When everyone else gave up, he didn't. He came through a window. He was bleeding everywhere, but he came for me. She wiped her eyes with her one hand. He wouldn't let me give up, so I didn't. The courtroom was silent. Then slowly, Ghost stood up. He walked down the aisle past the bailiff, who moved to stop him, and then thought better of it, past the lawyers and the jury, straight to the witness box. He sat down at Sophie's feet and rested his head on her knee. No one moved. No one spoke. The judge cleared her throat. I think we've heard enough. The verdict came 3 hours later. Guilty. On all counts. Vivian Cross was sentenced to life without parole. Marcus Webb got 25 years. Outside the courthouse, Sophie stood between Ryan and Reyes' Ghost, pressed against her leg. The sun was shining for the first time in weeks, melting the last of the snow, turning the world golden and new. It's over, Reyes said quietly. She can't hurt you anymore. Sophie nodded, but her eyes were somewhere else, somewhere far away. My parents, she said. Can we have a funeral for them, a real one? Aunt Vivian never let us. Ryan's heart broke. Of course, we can do whatever you want. And Jamie. Sophie's voice cracked. I want to say goodbye to Jamie. We'll do that too. Sophie looked up at him, her eyes red but clear. Will you stay with me? Yes. Promise. Ryan knelt down so he was at her level. Ghost moved closer, pressing his body against both of them. I promise, Ryan said. I'm not going anywhere. None of us are. Sophie threw her arm around his neck and held on tight. Ghost's tail wagged slowly, steadily, like a heartbeat. For the first time in 8 months, Sophie felt something she had forgotten existed. Safety. Home. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following week. Ryan hired a lawyer. He gathered character witnesses. He documented everything he had done for Sophie, everything he planned to do. The night before the hearing, Sophie couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch with Ghost watching Ryan pace back and forth. "What if they say no?" she asked quietly. Ryan stopped pacing. "Then I'll appeal. And if they say no again, I'll appeal again. I'm not giving up." "But what if—" "Sophie." Ryan sat down across from her. "Do you remember what you told me in the diner when I asked if you wanted to sit with me?" Sophie shook her head. "You didn't ask. You just sat down." Ryan smiled. "You knew what you needed, and you went after it. That's exactly what I'm going to do." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stopped Ryan's heart. "I want you to be my dad." The words hung in the air. Ghost lifted his head, his eyes moving between them. Not like replace my real dad. "But," Sophie struggled to find the words, "I don't have anyone else. And you came back for me. You and Ghost. You're the only ones who came back." Ryan felt tears slide down his cheeks. He didn't try to hide them. "I would be honored to be your dad," he said. "If that's what you want. It's what I want. Then that's what we'll do." The judge approved the adoption 3 weeks later. Sophie stood in the courtroom, Ghost at her side, Ryan's hand in hers, and listened to the words that changed everything. "By the power vested in me by the state of Arizona, I hereby grant full legal custody of Sophie Miller to Ryan Caldwell." Sophie turned to Ryan. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. The first real smile in over a year. "It's official," she whispered. "It's official," Ryan agreed. Ghost barked once, sharp and joyful, and the whole courtroom laughed. Outside, the sun was shining. The snow had melted completely, and the first flowers of spring were pushing through the earth. Sophie walked between Ryan and Ghost, her steps steadier than they had been in months. Her new prosthetic fit perfectly now adjusted by specialists who actually cared. "Where do we go now?" she asked. "Home," Ryan said. "We go home." Sophie looked up at him, then down at Ghost, then out at the world that had tried so hard to break her. "Home," she repeated, as if testing the word. It tasted like hope. 6 months had passed since the courtroom, and Sophie Miller still woke up some nights gasping for air, reaching for something that wasn't there. But now, when the darkness came, she wasn't alone. Ghost would lift his head from his spot beside her bed, and Ryan would appear in the doorway moments later, as if some invisible thread connected them all. "Bad dream?" Ryan asked softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. Sophie nodded, her breathing still ragged. "The fire again." "Tell me about it." She had learned that talking helped. Not right away, not when the terror was fresh, but after. When her heart had slowed, and Ghost's warmth had seeped into her bones. "I was looking for Jamie," she whispered. "But I couldn't find him. The smoke was everywhere, and I kept calling his name, and he never answered." Ryan took her hand. "He heard you, Sophie. Wherever he is now, he heard you." "You think so? I know so." Ghost shifted closer, resting his chin on Sophie's knee. His eyes caught the moonlight, ancient and knowing. "Sometimes I forget what his laugh sounded like," Sophie said. "Is that bad? Does that make me a bad sister?" "No." Ryan's voice was firm. "It makes you human. Memories fade. That doesn't mean the love does." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made Ryan's heart crack open. I don't want to forget him, but I don't want to be sad forever either. Ryan pulled her into a hug. You won't be. Sad and happy can live in the same heart. That's what healing looks like. Sophie buried her face in his shoulder. I'm glad you found me. I didn't find you. Ryan smiled against her hair. Ghost did. Ghost's tail thumped once against the mattress, as if he understood. The memorial service was held on a Saturday in early April, when the wildflowers were just beginning to push through the Arizona soil. Sophie had planned it herself with Ryan's help choosing the location, and the music, and the words she wanted spoken. It was a small gathering. Ryan, Detective Reyes, Carlos Vega, a few neighbors who had become friends. And Ghost, of course, wearing a black bandana that Sophie had tied around his neck. They stood in a circle on a hillside overlooking the valley, 3 small stones marking the place Sophie had chosen. Her father, her mother, her brother. Together again, at least in memory. I wrote something, Sophie said, her voice trembling. Is it okay if I read it? Of course it is, Ryan said. Sophie pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Her hand shook, but her voice was clear. Dear Mom and Dad and Jamie, I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I got out and you didn't. For a long time I thought it was my fault. I thought if I had been faster or stronger or braver, maybe you would still be here. She paused, wiping her eyes. But Ryan told me something. He said brave people never feel brave. He said they just do what needs to be done even when they're scared. I was scared that night. I'm still scared sometimes, but I'm trying to be brave like you taught me. Ghost pressed against her leg, and she reached down to touch his head. I have a new family now. Ryan and Ghost. They take care of me. They make sure I eat breakfast and do my homework and brush my teeth. Ryan reads to me at night, and Ghost sleeps by my bed so the nightmares can't get me. A tear slid down her cheek. I know you would like them. I know you would want me to be happy. So I'm going to try. I'm going to try really hard. And when I grow up, I'm going to help other kids like me, kids who are scared and alone, kids who need someone to find them. She looked up at the sky. I love you. I'll always love you, and I'll never forget you. Not really. Not the parts that matter. She folded the paper and placed it beneath one of the stones. Then she stood up and walked back to Ryan. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders and held her while she cried. Ghost leaned against both of them, a warm, steady presence. That was beautiful, Reyes said, her voice thick. They would be so proud of you. Sophie nodded, unable to speak. Later, as the others drifted away, Sophie and Ryan sat on the hillside together. Ghost lay between them, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and peaceful. Ryan. Yeah, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you help me that day in the diner? You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. Why did you stay? Ryan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because I know what it feels like to be invisible. To be in a room full of people and have no one see you. He looked at her. When you walked into that diner, I saw you. Really saw you. And I couldn't look away. Ghost saw me first. Ghost always sees what matters. Ryan smiled. He knew before I did. Sophie leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. I'm glad he did. Me too, kid. Me too. The idea came to Sophie 3 weeks later during a therapy session. Her therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Chen, had asked her what she wanted to do when she grew up. Sophie had thought about it for a long time before answering. "I want to help kids like me, kids who are scared and don't have anyone to protect them." "That's a wonderful goal. How do you think you could do that?" Sophie had looked at Ghost, who was lying at her feet like he always did during sessions. "Dogs," she said. "Dogs like Ghost. They find people who are hurting. They don't give up." That night she told Ryan, "I want to start something," she said. A charity or something. For kids and dogs. Military dogs who need homes and kids who need protection." Ryan set down his coffee. "Tell me more." "Ghost saved my life. But he didn't have anyone after he got hurt in the war. He was alone. And I was alone too." Sophie's eyes shone with determination. "What if we could put them together? Dogs who need purpose, and kids who need someone to believe in them." Ryan stared at her. This 7-year-old girl who had survived things that would have broken most adults. This child who had every reason to be bitter and angry and afraid. And instead, she wanted to help others. "I think that's the best idea I've ever heard," he said. Sophie's face lit up. "Really? Really, let's do it." They called it Ghost's Mission. It started small. Ryan reached out to his military contacts, finding retired working dogs who were struggling to adjust to civilian life. Sophie wrote letters to children in foster care, telling her story, telling them they weren't alone. The first match was a German shepherd named Duke, and a 10-year-old boy named Marcus, who hadn't smiled in 2 years. When Duke licked Marcus's face and the boy laughed, Sophie cried. "This is what it's supposed to feel like," she told Ryan. "This is why we're here." Word spread. A local news station did a story, then a national one. Donations poured in. Volunteers appeared. Within 3 months, Ghost's Mission had placed 15 dogs with 15 children. Each match was carefully made, each bond nurtured and supported. Detective Reyes became the organization's first board member. Carlos handled security and vetting. Dr. Chen offered free therapy sessions for the children. "You built something real," Reyes told Sophie during one of their monthly dinners. "Something that's going to outlast all of us." Sophie shook her head. "I didn't build it. We all did. Together." Ghost lifted his head from his spot beneath the table and thumped his tail, as if agreeing. Sophie's 8th birthday fell on a Sunday. Ryan had wanted to throw a big party invite everyone they knew, but Sophie had asked for something smaller. Just the people who mattered. The people who had saved her. They gathered in the backyard of the cabin that had become home. Ryan and Sophie. Ghost. Detective Reyes. Carlos. Dr. Chen. And a new addition, a girl named Ava, Sophie's best friend from school, along with her mother, Denise. The cake was chocolate with blue frosting, Sophie's favorite. Ghost wore a party hat that he kept trying to shake off. Everyone laughed when it finally flew across the yard. "Make a wish," Ryan said, holding the cake in front of her. Sophie closed her eyes. For a long moment, she was still. Then she opened them, smiled, and blew out the candles. "What did you wish for?" Ava asked. "Can't tell you. Then it won't come true." "That's not how it works. That's exactly how it works." The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and food and presents. Sophie opened gifts and new drawing set books about dogs, a photo album that Ryan had put together of her first 6 months with them. She lingered on the last page, a picture of her Ryan and Ghost taken on the hillside where they had held the memorial. They were silhouetted against the sunset, 3 shapes pressed together like they had always belonged that way. "Thank you," she whispered to Ryan. "For everything." "There's one more present," Ryan said. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Sophie opened it. Inside was a certificate, official-looking, with her name on it. "I don't understand," she said. "What is this? It's Ghost's handler certification. As of today, you're his official handler. He belongs to you now. Legally. Forever." Sophie's hands started to shake. "He was always mine," she said, tears streaming down her face. "From the moment he walked across that diner. I know, but now the whole world knows too." Sophie threw her arms around Ryan and hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. Ghost jumped up and tried to join them, his tail wagging furiously. "Best birthday ever," Sophie said into Ryan's shoulder. "Best birthday ever." That evening, after the guests had gone and the cake had been reduced to crumbs, Sophie and Ryan sat on the porch with Ghost between them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Can I tell you something?" Sophie asked. "Always. I used to think the world was a bad place. After the fire, after Aunt Vivian, I thought everyone was just waiting to hurt me. That's understandable. But it's not true." Sophie looked at him, her eyes clear and bright. "There are bad people, like Vivian, like Marcus, but there are good people too, like you, like Detective Reyes, like everyone who came today." Ryan nodded slowly. "What made you change your mind?" "Ghost." Sophie ran her hand through the dog's fur. "He didn't have any reason to help me. He didn't know me. He didn't owe me anything. But he saw that I was hurting, and he didn't look away." She leaned against Ryan's side. "That's what good people do. They don't look away." Ryan felt tears prick his eyes. This child, this incredible, brave, broken, healing child. "You're right," he said. "That's exactly what good people do." Ghost lifted his head and looked at both of them, his amber eyes reflecting the dying light. Then he sighed contentedly and laid his head back down. They sat in silence as the stars came out one by one, until the sky was filled with light. 1 year after Sophie walked into the Pine Cone Diner, Ghost's mission held its anniversary celebration. 50 dogs had been placed with 50 children, 50 lives saved twice over. Sophie stood at the podium, her new prosthetic arm gleaming in the light, Ghost sitting proudly beside her. She was taller now, stronger, her hair neat and her clothes clean. But more than that, she was different on the inside, whole in a way she hadn't been before. "A year ago," she said into the microphone, "I was the girl nobody wanted. I walked into a diner and everyone turned me away. Everyone except one man and his dog." She looked at Ryan sitting in the front row, his eyes glistening. "Ryan taught me that family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who choose you, who stay when it gets hard, who fight for you when you can't fight for yourself." She reached down and touched Ghost's head. "And Ghost taught me something even more important. He taught me that love doesn't need words. It doesn't need explanations. It just needs showing up every day, no matter what." She straightened up, her voice growing stronger. "Every child in this room has a story. Some of those stories are hard. Some of them are scary. But none of them are over. Because we have each other now. We have the dogs who found us. And we have the people who refused to look away." She smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise. "My name is Sophie Miller Caldwell. I'm 8 years old, and I'm not invisible anymore." The room erupted in applause. Ghost barked, sharp and joyful. Ryan stood up, tears streaming down his face, clapping so hard his hands hurt. Sophie walked off the stage and into his arms. "I'm proud of you," he said. "So incredibly proud. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could. You're stronger than you know." Sophie pulled back and looked at him, her expression serious. "Ryan." "Yeah. I love you, you know that, right? Like a dad." Ryan's heart stopped, then started again, beating harder than before. "I love you too," he said, his voice breaking. "Like a daughter, always." Ghost pushed between them, demanding attention, and they both laughed through their tears. Later that night, Sophie sat at her desk, Ghost curled at her feet, and opened her journal. She had started writing in it 6 months ago at Dr. Chen's suggestion, a way to process everything that had happened. She picked up her pen and began to write. "Dear future Sophie, today was a good day. The best day, maybe. I stood up in front of all those people and told them my story. And they listened. They really listened." She paused, looking at Ghost. "A year ago, I didn't think I would ever speak again. I didn't think anyone would ever want me. I was so sure that I was broken, that I would always be broken, that there was no point in hoping for anything better." She turned to look out the window, where the stars were beginning to appear. "But I was wrong. Ghost found me. Ryan chose me. And together we built something beautiful." She turned back to the page. "If you're reading this someday, and you've forgotten what it felt like to be scared and alone, I want you to remember. Remember how dark it was. Remember how hopeless. And then remember that you got through it, not alone, but together, with the family that found you." She signed her name at the bottom and closed the journal. Ghost lifted his head, looking at her with those wise, ancient eyes. "Time for bed, boy," Sophie said, scratching behind his ears. They walked to her room together, Sophie's prosthetic clicking softly against the floor. She climbed into bed, and Ghost jumped up beside her, settling into his usual spot. "Sophie," Ryan's voice came from the doorway. "Yeah, everything okay? Everything's perfect." He smiled. "Good night, kiddo." "Good night, Dad." The word hung in the air, warm and real and true. Ryan's eyes glistened. "Good night, sweetheart." He turned off the light and closed the door. In the darkness, Sophie reached out and found Ghost's fur. The dog sighed contentedly, pressing closer. "Thank you," she whispered, "for finding me, for not giving up, for being the bravest dog in the whole world." Ghost's tail thumped once against the blanket. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. The stars wheeled overhead. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the moon. But Sophie wasn't afraid anymore. She had Ghost. She had Ryan. She had a family. And no matter what came next, she knew one thing for certain. She would never be alone again. Sometimes the miracles we pray for don't come as thunder or lightning. They come as a 7-year-old girl with one arm and no voice walking into a diner on a winter day. They come as a retired Marine who has forgotten how to hope. They come as a dog who breaks every rule he was ever taught because something inside him knows that love matters more than obedience. Faith isn't found only in churches. It lives in the choices we make when no one is watching, in the hands that reach out instead of turning away, in the hearts that stay open even when staying closed would be easier. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe in quiet miracles and second chances, please subscribe so these stories can reach the people who need them most. May God bless you and keep you. May He put the right people in your path at exactly the right moment. And may you never forget that sometimes the most unthinkable thing in the world is simply this love that refuses to give up.